the use of vagine to read super chats is misogynistic, and a use of a stereotype that denigrates people of Indian, Pakistani, etc. descent. That there's something inherently funny about the way that they speak, the way that they dress. And it's not just the reading part that's the problem with Vagine. It's how Jim Bob interacts with Vagine. If you maybe will catch this more as people super chat, Vagine reads them. But it's not just that there's some inherent humor in how Vagine speaks and looks, but Jim Bob will yell at Vagine. Jim Bob will ask very angrily for Vagine to shut up. What conclusion are we supposed to draw from treating a person that is speaking differently, looking differently than Jim Bob, and that they get to be the target of his ire when he's getting a gift from his community? What do you guys think?
What's up, Jim Bob? How are you, bro?
I'm doing very well, thank you. How are you doing?
Yeah, I can't complain. Wanted to get you on today to just talk all about this evolution debate that's been going on. You've been doing a lot of these evolution debates, and as much as I watch them, I can never actually understand the arguments that are going on because I've never been a science guy. I was always in the veggie science classes.
Well, I mean, you came from a pile of bacteria and your uncle was a fish.
I knew there was something off about my uncle.
So, yeah. Definitely. Not just for the reasons you thought, but there's more.
Yeah. Wasn't he a banana as well? That's what they're saying.
There's a banana also. That's right. Cousin banana, Uncle Fish. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah. I remember watching the guys from the Apologia Church, James White and I can't remember Jeff Durbin. They were doing this debate once, and they were debating against this atheist and saying, well, so you believe that fish became philosophers? And that line always stood out to me. It was like, you believe that fish became philosophers? How did fish become philosophers?
That's great. That's so beautiful, that rhetoric. I'm gonna pick that one up because that's essentially what you have to believe, is that a set of accidental, purely chemical, biological things, events happened, and eventually over time produced Aristotle and philosophy and calculus and everything else. And it's purely incidental, by the way, from their view, meaning that it wasn't purposed toward that direction. It accidentally unfolded so that we can fly airplanes.
Yeah. Too funny. All right, so let's take it back to the start. First of all, it's just evolution for dummies. What is evolution? Where does it come from? Why is it such a pervasive theory?
Well, I mean, most people would go to just like Darwin, but I think the philosophy of evolution can be tied back to Hinduism a bit in the way that it's this kind of ongoing cyclical death and rebirth of natures, basically. But without all of the Hindu stuff, it pretty much starts with Darwin. Observing things, the Royal Society. Now, keep in mind at the time, these are people who had very strong beliefs about superior races and ultimately the direction of races from this perspective. And so people like to kind of ignore that part and try to siphon out the good science from the time of Darwin, but there's really no science to it, which is why I aggravate these people so much. So Darwin looked at some birds and some other things and saw that their beaks changed and their feathers got longer or shorter, or their claws got sharper or duller. And somehow they came to the conclusion that, similar functions and changes entail coming from from different things, right? That we all come from
Right.
something else, which for me, it perked up. I used to be a proponent for evolution. And now when I got
Right.
into philosophy a little bit, I realized when you say that something, what it is, comes from something that it wasn't, whether the time frame is short or long, it doesn't make sense to me, and it never did. And now I'm just have the tools to sort of cross-examine it at this point.
Right. So you used to be a proponent, as in you used to want to debate on the side of evolution, but then what was the key points that made you really change your mind and think, actually, this is not a viable position?
Well, I wouldn't debate it. I would just by default, like most people, as a product
Yeah.
of the public education system, just be like, well, yeah, I mean, duh, it's already been established. So I used to just say that. But once I started cross-examining, well, what's been established? What exactly are the assumptions that have been established? And once you go a little bit more granular against evolution, you realize what they're saying in clear terms is random mutation produces hyper-specialized mechanisms. That's what they're saying. And so once you frame it and try to get it as clear as they could possibly state it, you start asking very basic questions. I don't know, like how? It sounds really silly, right? Like you got to pretend to be a seventh grader. How? How does that happen? And you notice if you've seen some of my interactions, when you ask how, they kind of lose their stuff, don't they? They kind of lose it.
Yeah, it seems that way, but then they seem to frame it in a way where it's so self-evident and it's so obvious that you're just an absolute idiot and a science denier for even asking this question. And the thing that they seem to be saying, if I'm not mistaken, is that this happens from natural selection. So nature adapts for stronger qualities in order to ensure survival of the species. And then over time, it adapts more and more to the point where the species itself actually changes? Or?
Not exactly. There's 4 mechanisms, and most of the time there are 2 that are highlighted. One you named, which is natural selection. The other being random mutation, genetic drift, and genetic gene flow. And so the first 2, though, are the most commonly talked about. Now, think of it like a factory system. There's the place of the factory where the things are built, in this case, accidentally. And then there's the quality control. What you just described, natural selection, would be the quality control. That is to say, things are built accidentally. They either incidentally give an advantage to the organism or not in reality. And the external environment is the quality control that says, hey, you either survive or don't. You know what I mean? Like, oh, that's a cool appendage you just accidentally created. Cool, it works for the environment. So the environment is like sort of testing, everything that's built accidentally is tested against the environment, the seasons, the elements, other animals, this climate and whatnot. So that's what the natural selection is. But the problem is natural selection doesn't account for the things that are built. And that's why I use that analogy. If you have a factory and there's a section that does quality control is after something's built, right? So you got to think of it from that perspective. So I don't actually let them go to quality control yet. I say, no, can you take me on tour to the evolutionary factory that builds an eyeball? Or I just recently looked up on a recent stream, the vestibular system, the thing that gives us balance and spatial awareness. When you look into this stuff, Jake, it's so insanely precise the way it works. It's so precise. To say the precision required for even something like the vestibular system that keeps our balance, to say that was produced from random mutation accidentally, but works perfectly, like perfectly function for what it is, you start to get into weird territory when you ask them questions. They start getting squirrely when you ask these people these questions. So I'm having a joy doing it.
I can imagine. So the quality control is the natural select, where they're selecting for the stronger mechanisms, right? So this works, this doesn't work. So what is the answer that they give you when they ask how you actually built it, or how the thing was manufactured before it gets to the quality control center?
Mostly a combination of gaslighting me, as you said. Oh, that's such a silly question. Over time, duh. They say over time it just happens, essentially. every time I've talked to an evolutionary biologist or someone who's proposes to be educated in the subject, whether it's Forrest Valkai or the guy I debated on Modern Day Debate or douchebag Dave, Professor Dave, they don't have an answer for this. They say random mutation. Well, that's the question. How does random mutation produce these specialized features that do very specific tasks in the body? Not only that, Jake, but the development from random mutation as a process to produce hyper-specialized mechanisms. Guess what? When you look at your body, all of these specialized mechanisms also work together, right? Holistically. So that's another component, right? That's like saying, like, let's build a city one block at a time, but have no relational awareness to the rest of the city. Right? That's not how they build cities. So if the body is similar to a city and it operates that way, it has highways, it has central places, it has a heart, it has a brain, it has all of these components that are tied together. Now, evolution has to say not only did random mutation produce a very specialized thing like the liver, but it has to say it built the relationships between these things as well, accidentally.
Wouldn't they just say then, though, that they're building something that has the necessities are there, the environment around the thing is changing, so then the thing has to adapt to the environment, so maybe the thing needs a beak to get into long places to get the ants or whatever.
No, they wouldn't say out of necessity. Sometimes they go there, but that's actually not the view. The view is that random mutation happens to produce something incidentally that's a longer beak, and then the chance of passing that down is increased because it has a longer beak. It could eat longer. It could eat and then survive, basically. But it's not it doesn't produce a beak for the purpose of anything, which you saw what happens when you remove purpose from these items. Because guess what, Jake? When you ask someone like, I don't know, not a Professor Dave, whether or not his brain exists for some function or purpose to think, he says no. He says no, right? So it gets into
We've actually got some video evidence of that.
That's true.
Right, yeah. Let's just play this one. First of all, wait.
Oh, that's that.
Oh. First of all, before we do any of that, this. One of the best things I've seen in a very long time.
Yeah, that's a special one. That's a special one.
It's so simple. There's not that much to it, but it's just, you know how they say a painted picture speaks 1,000 words?
That's right. That's right.
All right. Anyway, Professor Dave, this is your encounter with him. It was 1 minute and 16 seconds.
Mutation is random.
Go on. Did you? Oh, was that you speaking in the video? Yeah, my bad. All right, I'll continue.
Natural selection is not.
Okay, so then would you agree that from your perspective that the brain was a process of random mutations, produced by random mutations?
Brains in general and every other organ and every other aspect of all life ever. Yes.
Okay, so then, and it wasn't developed for any purpose, right?
No, not any inherent purpose, but it serves, it is useful, right? Animals with brains have processing ability, and then especially humans, we have this huge frontal lobe that is capable of all kinds of complex.
I understand. But you would say that your brain has no real purpose, right?
It has no inherent purpose. I use it for the purpose of thinking.
Okay, but it's not made for the purpose of thinking.
There is no God that on purpose made things with the purpose that
I didn't say God. No, God doesn't exist in this hypothetical.
Okay.
I just want you to understand from your view.
Then you would agree that nothing would have any kind of inherent purpose from a higher power. If it's all chance, then there's no inherent purpose to anything other than what proliferates due to conferring a survival advantage.
And so why would I listen to sounds coming from a purposeless brain?
Because I'm right.
Wow. Just wow.
The smugness is absolutely incredible.
He should teach debate and epistemology because I'm right. Now I want to key in there that when you ask someone like not a Professor Dave whether or not his brain has any purpose to think, and he says it's all accidental, he's admitting that his own reasoning is accidental. Now, can you imagine debating from the perspective that your reasoning itself, that your very task in reasoning and doing logic and coming to conclusions inductively, deductively, or doing math or everything else, that's accidental from his view. And yet he's very confident, notice, with his answer. that he's right.
He's right because he's right, I guess. It's because he's right. Why is he right? Because he's right.
He's accidentally right.
It puts it into perspective when you really think about it, because there are so many different axioms that we actually just accept without question. If you grow up in a modern secular world, like I grew up in Australia, very modern secular country, very much a declining religious. We used to have a religious core to this country when we were, when we were closer to the British Empire. But now, as we've become further away, we've become more secular. And there's just so many axioms that you just accept. There are so many presuppositions that you just accept. That evolution is true, and that life has some sort of a purpose, I guess, and the purpose is whatever I make of it. Love is love. I don't know. There are so many different things that you just accept as self-evident. But then when you actually start to ask questions about them, it logically makes sense that actually everything is just flux and chaos, if that's your worldview. If you really are an atheist and you believe that everything is purposeless, there's no telos, everything is just flux and chaos, that is a pretty unbelievable worldview to have, and it's extremely chaotic worldview to have. And you sort of see people's brains malfunction a little bit when they realize that that's the logical entailment of their worldview.
Yeah, and then you add in the natural element here, which is the philosophy of evolution, which is it's basically teaching people that they are also just derivative animals, right? And so are we surprised that people act more animalistic when you teach entire societies that they are literally animals, that they're really no different than an ape? I got like 5 evolution opponents that I debated to just straight out say, when I asked them, is George Floyd an ape? And they say, yeah. And it's like, ironically, I'm the one saying no.
I saw that.
Yeah. And so, that part is like they're arguing against us that humans are uniquely created, uniquely status. They have a unique status. They're saying, no. We come from hunched over beasts. And before that, we come from more hunched over beasts. And eventually you go back to sludge, right? We come from sludge. Well, there's an entailment philosophically to that. The kind of irony socially now, though, is that most of these people who are they're basically dogmatic evolution proponents, and they are often atheists. There are, of course, people who call themselves Christians and theists who also try to make evolution work. But for the most part, it's a naturalistic, atheistic held view. And what's interesting is with all of these social issues we have now, from their perspective, wouldn't it be just true, that dominating society, whatever group dominated society, would be selected for behavior if we just did it, right? There's nothing. There shouldn't be something problematic about that from their view. Whether it's like they're always accusing people of racism or fascism. And you're like, I'm always asking these people, over time, if we did that, right? If someone did that, if it worked for them in their particular group, wouldn't that just be selected for? Like, wouldn't that be a trait to be able to do that? And they don't want to deal with this problem because it causes a bunch of cognitive dissonance, because most of them are they're moralizing all the time.
Yeah, I mean, if you really wanted to take it there, it's a good point. Like, if you wanted to select for things that would ensure survival and that would ensure harmony, you would probably get rid of the criminal aspects of society. You'd probably get rid of the old people as well, the old people, the weak people. You'd probably get rid of the disabled and everything. And there's a certain painter out there that actually, had some good ideas if you took it to that conclusion.
Well, interesting enough that the Yazidis were very, very partial to the philosophy coming out of Darwin and the Royal Society as well. Like that whole idea of a superior man is parallel completely to the kind of philosophy of the time. And now if you look into some of the quotes from like Descent of Man or any of Darwin's works, and even adjacent people who were selling evolution to the masses, they were very explicit about the differences that they perceived between fellow man, at the time. They were very explicit. There are charts that they drew, all sorts of interesting stuff you can see and look up. Now, what they're trying to do is sort of sterilize the past and say, well, yeah, that was the times, though. Everyone, was kind of racist or everyone, held this view. But no, once you look deeper, it's embedded in the philosophy, evolution. The idea that there are lesser, quote, men, lesser people, they're lesser, is embedded in the philosophy of evolution. And it's an entailment anyway. Even if it wasn't like there from the start, the entailment is winner takes all, right? Darwinian chessboard, let's go, right? It's the ultimate force doctrine, in fact.
It is, yeah. But with force doctrine, at least you can sort of acknowledge the descriptive reality that is force doctrine, and then you can take it somewhere else in terms of the Christian ethicist view of the prescriptions that would follow, right? Mm-hmm. But with evolution and with Darwinism, you'd have to acknowledge that descriptive reality, and then you can't actually make a prescription because then you're getting into these normative claims and you have no leg to stand on when you're doing that. So they have no way to actually criticize somebody like the painter.
No, they couldn't. They'd have to criticize it from the evolutionary view. And, whatever your opinions or your intuitions about that morally, those would be inconsequential because, evolution is not geared toward moral truths or truth at all, as Plantinga, established through his argumentation. Now, what I do is I take Alvin Plantinga's argument, evolutionary argument against truth itself. It's in simple form. It's evolution is not geared. It's geared towards survival, if anything, not toward truth itself. So it has nothing to do with like philosophy or coming to philosophical or mathematical truths. It's about survival. So you could actually argue that someone could believe a lie, and it could be advantageous to their survival to believe a lie. Mm-hmm. And I just kind of take that and I zero in even more. And I argue that like without any proper purpose for things, including our brain, you can't actually say something's not working correctly. So let me lay it out for you. If someone said, oh, your brain's not working correctly, right? Go to the doctor. If you were to be consistent with the evolutionary view, you really couldn't say the brain was working incorrectly because there's no real purpose of the brain.
Yeah, it's true.
So name anything that you claim out loud isn't working correctly and try to do that without appealing to its purpose, right? It's impossible to do. And so they hold this view, as you saw with Not a Professor Dave there. And, that's probably why that went so viral and I'm getting so many attacks from all sides on my channel is because that was so embarrassing, philosophically speaking, for someone to hold a view that their brain doesn't have the inherent purpose of thinking and reasoning properly,
Right. And so oftentimes, this is one thing I don't really get. And one of the chatters is saying here as well, he's saying something about creationists. So is a creationist, does that literally just mean that somebody believes that God created the earth in 7 days?
No.
However many, no.
No, because I think, I could be wrong about this prediction. I think that atheists, the secularists, I think they're going to adopt in our lifetime an intelligent design view, just not God. So you could say a creationist from a colloquial perspective and say that aliens did it, like aliens manufactured the world, right? A type of, satellite location, like their own little aquarium or whatever. You could kind of, fantasize about that and make that work. But creationism doesn't need to be deployed in order to argue against evolution. And this is another thing you'll see in my debates, Jake, is my opponent will be so surprised that I'm not offering a dilemma or a dichotomy between evolution and creation. I could set creation aside, similar to how Andrew sets aside any sort of objective moral truths about Christianity, just argues from within their paradigm. And I take the same approach against them. They don't like it because they wish they could, throw a stinky fish down the stream and go, can we talk about creation now? No, we're talking about evolution. I don't appeal to God at all when I cross-examine evolution.
Right, that's interesting. So it's sort of like you were saying before, Andrew's debate tactics. Sometimes you actually want to enter into their home ground. and to play it within their rules, within the secularist rules. And this is super effective because it sort of disarms them in a way, because then they can't use the various different rhetorical techniques that the God not real dough, the Reddit atheist sort of talking points, and they have to actually address the logic of the point that they're talking about with evolution. So what other sort of debate tactics have you figured out? Because obviously this has become a serious lane for you, this evolution stuff, the evolution debate. So what have you figured out, and what angle are you hitting that you think is unique and necessary?
Well, the two angles I take is philosophical. So one is the one I showed, demonstrated with Dave there, which is get them to admit their own brain doesn't have any purpose. Now, whether or not they understand the entailment of that, maybe that's up to the audience. The second would be similarly, they appeal to categories like clades, cladistics, which are a larger category, and then the subcategories would be like species and different things like that.
Wait, clades is types of species, or what is it?
No. A clade would be like a larger category of an organism from which other species come forth, like branches in a tree. Like a clade would be one branch, and then off of that clade would be some multiplicity of species. For instance,
So a clade is like a mammal? Or no.
Well,
like
it could
branch
be,
would be a mammal.
Well, this is what's interesting. I asked them what it is, and this is another attack, and it is a philosophical attack. When you press people on this, not only does clade not have an objective standard for what it is, it's ambiguous, so does species. They don't have a strict definition for these things. They're ambiguous. And so that's a weakness from their perspective, because if you were to say evolution, for evolution to be true, this idea of species coming forth from other animals needs to happen, but they don't have an objective term for a species. So when you make the objective claim biologically, naturally, you're saying, oh, it's a biological fact that species come from this other thing, right? Humans, that species comes from something not human. And you go, wait, okay. First of all, you're going to have to justify how you know humans as a category comes from another category that's not human. But that's also going to require that you define what a human is and what not a human is. But they can't really do that. And so this is why their tree of life, Jake, if you look at it visually, it all just kind of goes into this one big tree, right? Back into the past. And it's endless regress, by the way. So it pushes, speaking of another tactic, you keep pushing them back in time, and they have to keep inventing the earliest form of life. But they have to deny they're like, I don't want to argue abiogenesis, which is their account that would be necessary for the jump between non-living to living. That's the big problem. Now, they don't think this is a problem because they go, no, evolution, we argue from once we have life. And I go, well, I'm not granting you once we have life. Like, you don't just get life for free, right? Okay. So I press them on that as well. So
do they have any theories as to how that happens? Or?
Yeah, they tried it. Well, this is how they argue. They argue that if they can find the components that life consists of, and they're somehow out there, then there could be this wild a possibility, which is against all math, that all kind of bundles together accidentally and sort of does its thing, right? It starts, the earlier form was like a lightning striking on like a pond or whatever. So they need some sort of action to beget the first life, right?
That's quite funny. Yeah.
It is. Yeah, no, it's literally like Marvel stuff, dude. And this is why it's such a important philosophical angle, because what we're really questioning is what we are, and what we are needs to be tied to our origin. You never can separate what you are and how you are and why you are from an origin story. And so they're denying the Christian origin story, but they're denying a whole slew of other religious origin stories. And they're really just kind of swapping it out for a naturalistic origin story. But it's just as faithful. It requires just as much faith as any other origin story. They're up against their own naturalistic paradigm, which needs to make sense mathematically to them, but it doesn't. Like some of the math, dude, I'll send you a video. I'm going to be doing a couple videos on the math element soon. The math is so insane once you look at it. Like even if you granted them all of their time, 14 billion, whatever they want, I'll give you any amount of time. Just working from basic like proteins and amino acids, they don't even have the time for that. And they're saying a wolf-like land animal turned into a whale in 15 million years. Like, they actually believe this. And if you watch some of the cartoons they make, I could see why they believe it, because they're basically giving their kids cartoons from childhood of like a wolf turning into a whale. It's wild.
A wolf turning into a whale. So they believe that the wolf came first. And
Not the wolf. No. I'm being a little bit hyperbolic. They say there's a thing called a Pakicetus, and this is like a land animal that's sort of like the size of a wolf, but kind of like a cow or something like this. They don't know what it is, and they go, well, this clearly walked into the water slowly, and over many successions of generations and mutations, random. It turned into what we see the whale is today. They believe this in their head. They visualize it in their head that this happened, right? It's like a cartoon,
Really?
like, and then you go, how did that happen? And they go that it happened
Over time.
Yeah, over time.
Yeah,
Time
over
did
time.
it. Time did it.
Time did it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, I guess if you don't think about it too hard,
Yeah.
it kind of can make sense. You
In
know,
your
that
head.
we can't conceptualize. We have 80 years of life if we're lucky. We can't conceptualize 15 million years, 20 million years, and sometimes we do see various different adaptations of different animals. Like a dog might have more fur because they're from a different region of the world. You can get the different dogs from different parts of the world that obviously have different genetic adaptations. And then you're like, all right, well, if the dogs can do that within their own litter or within their own species, just how far could that adaptation go?
Yes.
And could it go to
Also,
a point where the dog
evolution
isn't a
doesn't
dog anymore,
pass
but
through
now
the
the dog's
scientific
eventually a
method.
whale?
Yes, it's called an extrapolation fallacy. It's also another type of fallacy is saying what's true of a part is true of the whole. So in this case, if you said there's types of dogs that have different types of fur and snouts and ears and whatnot, right? And if that could happen, then it must be true then that dog category itself changes. Right? But this is where it gets wonky and they fail to defend it is how would they know a dog category is no longer a dog category? How would they know the first humans when you ask them about, the chronology, the history of humanity? They say, well, this many thousand years, finally humans arrive on the scene. And I always ask them, is arrive a biological term? Like, is that arrive or arose, right? Is that a biological term? And they go, no, we're just using a figure of speech. And I say, can you do me a favor? I know you already think I'm dumb, but if I'm asking you what's actually happening and how do you know the moment or how do you distinguish humans are now officially the human category versus a time before where they're not that? And all they can do is appeal to gradualism. And like you said, if you grant gradualism, your brain does a lot of the interpolating. So I'll use this analogy. If Jake didn't know anything about evolution and I was the teacher and I drew a circle on the board and Jake came in and I told him to stay 30 feet away. And Jake's like, well, I want to get closer and learn, right? And I go, no, you look at the circle, it's evolution, right? Well, it looks like a perfect circle, right? From afar, from a broad stance, it looks like a good circle. Well, you defy me and you come closer. You start to look at what the circle's made up of. It's just dots. They're actually not connected at all. But your brain connected them all, right? It did the work for you in your head. I think this is why it's so effective when they teach it, is that from a young age you use your imagination. But if you start asking very specific questions at the granular level, you start to see that these segments are not connected at all. Like this story does not pan out at all.
That makes sense. That's actually a really good way to explain it, because it can seem, for example, like you said, if you're looking at the circle from a distance, like the circle is joined, but it's actually not. That's a good one. All right, what about the fossil records? Because this is another thing that they say, that the fossil records over time, you can see that the birds and the dinosaurs and everything have similar fossil records, and and that's an argument for evolution because you can track the fossils, and this shows us the change over time.
Yeah, well, the fundamental assumptions in what they call the fossil records can be questioned. For one is similarity in like anotypical or phenotypical similarity, the structure of something, doesn't tell you one comes from the other, right? There's genotypes that are not similar that have similar phenotypes. So something can look the same and not be related. And so what they use is like similarity in the short term, and they say, look, that thing looks like this thing, but you could find a bunch of things that look similar in their structure. And what you're looking at is similarity in function. So if something has similar things, what you're really saying is they have similar function, right? It doesn't follow that they come from each other. It doesn't even follow that they have a common ancestry. That's an interpretation. The other thing is when they say things like transitional fossils, transition is an event. A fossil is a particular item that you find. There's nowhere in the item, when you look at an item, do you see an event at all? So another it's interpolation again, right? The same problem with the circle I just said. They lay on the narrative and they go, look, this is one cell of the animation and this is the final cell of the animation. You know, when you use AI, it allows you, if you want to do a movie, you could do the initial frame and the end frame. That's kind of, you could do that. Like, so if I wanted, like, if we took a picture of us like this, Jake, facing each other, I could use that as the initial frame, and then I could finish a frame with you like totally knocking my eyeball out, and it would fill in the story, right? It would fill in the motion.
I've seen that. Yeah,
that's basically what evolution is when it comes to fossils. There is nothing they have inside of similarity of fossils that can actually justify their conclusion that one thing morphs into another over time. There's another problem here. The further you go back, so what they'll do is they'll use similarity in the short term to say, okay, we come from similar ancestors. Look at the similarity. The problem is the further you go back, the more dissimilar everything is. So how are you going to use in the short term similarity as this evidence that we have common ancestry when the further you go back, you have to then look at very dissimilar things and have to figure out, how do you know that we came from that then, right? They admit. I asked them in the debate.
Yeah, wouldn't they be getting more dissimilar now?
Yes. Well, look,
goes out.
Yeah. Look at it this way. The earliest creatures from their view are all very similar. They're all just basic organisms, right? Maybe asexual organisms or whatever. Right. But if you took a snapshot of what they looked like, they would look more dissimilar than we look now. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Those things would look nothing like us. But they think we came from those things as well. But the problem is, in the short term, they argue, oh, we come from this thing because it's similar.
Stephen Meyer's book,
it doesn't
Darwin's
work when you go
Doubt.
further back.
It explains how the Cambrian explosion makes Evo
And
impossible.
I want to get into the consciousness part of things now as well, because it's really interesting when you look at the obviously the physical changes over time and the biological changes over time and these arguments. But then consciousness is the one that I'm like, how do they even?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, but just quickly, we've got a few people been very generous today, guys. I do appreciate these super chats. Mighty Maximus has sent a few in, 2 20s there. And then a 10 say good evening to everyone, and for the mods, and also for Jake, Jim, Bob. Great collab. Always good to see these two legends working together. Always great to have you here as well, Mighty Maximus. AOW, Angel of War, sent 20. Thank you very much. Appreciate that greatly. And Dano says, Jim Bob arguments are so cutting and straight to the point. I love this noober. Big Dano. Good to see Dano. And then Red Fox asked Jim Bob about the problems of induction and circularity in evolution. Great guy to have on for this question. Jim Bob has been crushing it. All right. Red Fox did mention this in yesterday's stream when we were talking about doing this today. So induction and circularity in evolution. Give this so I can understand it. You've been doing well, by the way.
Yeah,
I'm understanding these arguments so far, so this is good.
Good. Yeah, so the inductive problem is it assumes the regularity of nature. And so what is nature? It's not just rocks falling. In nature, there is a continuation of how biology works. But the thing is, the evolution proponent arbitrarily draws out what's invariant, unchanging, and what changes. But the whole philosophy is that it changes, right? So the problem
of induction being the idea that what happens in the past is going to happen in the future, right?
Yeah, and it's problem that it's circular ultimately. That's a problem, right, that Hume established, is that the problem of circularity, that you have to put your faith in to this idea that the regularity of nature from the past will be like today, and then tomorrow will likely be like today and yesterday, and so on. But from the evolutionary view, where do they make that stop, right? Where is the faith in the invariant continuation of nature? Because, as we know, biology is a part of nature as well. But does biology always follow the same pattern if it's always changing, right? How do they justify the laws that are guiding in some way, from their view, without a mind, guiding this regular path of mutation, right? And so there's a problem there, because if you say that all of the biology is always in flux and ultimately chance-based and random, then you don't really have a regularity to appeal to in the past. So that's a big problem, right? Now, most of these people don't do any philosophy, so they go, you're just using word games. No, it's a real problem.
They don't have a justification for regularity, because we can observe regularity, but then once again, is this about the justification that they just sort of accept that?
Two parts. Two parts. The laws of nature, just like, thermodynamics and chemical reactions and this and that, but they interpret biology within that framework. So there's the initial problem of induction, but then there's this other specific problem that they have, which is, how does biology operate? Is it always operating in a very lawful way? Well, according to them, if there's any randomness, no. Like, if there's anything called random, which brings up another point, I debated someone who's an evolutionary biologist. Apparently, he's never been asked this question. In at least two of the mechanisms of evolution that they use these terms random, and it's really important to press them on it. What do you mean by random, and how do you know something's random? This question got this guy so bad. It was like he had a collapse in his brain when I asked him, how do you know anything's random? How do you know that? And he said, you look at it. No joke. He said, you look at it. I thought he should skip that and just say, because I'm right. He could have just said that, obviously.
I mean, to be honest, though, I'm trying to put myself in his shoes, and I'm trying to think about what else there is to say about that, because random in and of itself is a concept that would refer to sort of disorder and chaos. So wouldn't that make sense for him to say it's random because it's random? Like, that is just all there is. There is nothing but random? Or
No, I'm asking for a criterion for random. So he can say it, but if he means random just means it operates in a way that I don't understand all the variables, well, then you're saying it's not random. You're actually saying it's determined, you just don't know enough. And so which is it? Is it truly random? Or is it that you're observing something that doesn't meet your idea of how things should happen in time, right? I mean, think about it. We look at the laws of nature, the regularity of nature, and we have a predictive element to it where we can kind of focus on when water will boil or when this will happen. We wouldn't say that's random, right? That's outside now of the category of random. It's very ordered. But the reason we perceive it as ordered is because it's regular. But the problem with that is, if you declare at some point something's random, just because it goes outside of your interpretive capacity to say, to predict it, right? If that's what it is, you still can't say it's random. You just have to say, well, we couldn't have predicted this. We couldn't have predicted this insertion place of this ERV or this retrovirus. We couldn't predict this gene. But the thing is, if genes, from everything we know, have sort of like an informative capacity to tell organisms what to do and when to do it, if that's what's true about genes, right? That there's markers of when an arm grows and where an arm grows. This is like body plan stuff. This is like engineering level stuff. If that's all comes from random, you're actually saying that really specific body plans that have timed execution patterns, those are produced by a random factory. Like, dude, fine. I believe in God, but I don't need to appeal to God to make that sound absurd. Where is that ever true? Where did you ever observe?
Dude, that's a good point, man. Yeah. It's like, this might not make sense when I say it, but I'm thinking in my head right now about the climate change argument, how they say, well, climate change is real because we're going to have global warming, and then in 100 years, everybody's going to be dead. It's like, do you know how many different factors there are involved in that, in terms of the actual climate, in terms of all of the different plants and animals and the deserts and all of the different things about human ingenuity and technology and innovation? Just how many variables there are over the next 100 years that we can't possibly predict. For you to have the chutzpah to say that you predict that we're going to go from here to here in 100 years, it seems something sort of in the same universe as this argument here, because they're saying that this random mutation happens. And it's like, every time they make new inventions about the complexity of a single human cell, it's just mind-blowing for these scientists. And the Christians will look at that and be like, just can't believe
engineering.
Well, the Christians might look at that and be like, God is so amazing. But the atheists will look at that and think, oh, this is more proof that we're sciencing our way to the truth, I guess.
Sure.
But there are so many different factors involved. Every single cell and every organism is so infinitely complicated. Then to have a whole part of a human body that's adapted because of evolution to interact with all of these other cells and to interact with all these other body parts and have a very specific function, to look at that and then think, well, this must just be created from a random factory. That's kind of insane.
To saying it's a random. Now they could obfuscate and just keep changing what they mean by random. It still doesn't solve their problem that they're in, because they have to say, even if they reject randomness, they still reject that there's any direction there's any direction at all, right? Everything's random from their view, except for natural selection and maybe some drift that happens that's determined by the environment, which is another problem, Jake. They say that the environment determines the life and the outcome of these organisms. Well, last time you looked, Jake, when you look at, quote, the environment, which, by the way, is a metaphysical category for particulars, what are a lot of the particulars we see out there in the environment? They're living organisms. So it's like using the term environment. Oh, random selection is the environment decides it. And well, obviously they don't mean with a mind, but they're saying the environment determines it. But the environment is made up of a bunch of unrelated, from their view, particulars of other living things: ecology, plants, and other animals, predators, right? They are also subject to natural selection, and yet at the same time, they are part of the selection process. So it's to them, it has to be both, right? How do you distinguish what's the environment determining natural selection and who's subject to natural selection, if the environment is made up of subjects to natural selection themselves? Now, you said something else, the climate, right? They say, well, things adapt, and if they work out for the environment, they're selected for and they're passed on through the gene pool, right? Well, the environment changes too, right? So that's one more variable that changes, right? That's like playing the roulette table, but every once in a while, the floor shakes, right? It's not just the roulette table for the chances. Now you have some other element that comes in and offsets it. Well, for something to accidentally develop as a mechanism over millions of years that's adaptive and advantageous to the environment that it's in has to stay the same too. Otherwise, when it's done baking, or when it finally, produces some advantage, right? If the environment changed, which environments do change, they just did all this work in calories toward building accidentally new apparatuses for the environment that is no longer present, right? That has to happen too. It's another variable.
It's so true with the climate change thing. It's like the environment has to stay. We can't have a meteor strike. We can't have a massive earthquake or anything like that, because that will throw off all of the predictions. We can't have an AI revolution, because then that will throw off all of the predictions. We can't have a greening of the Sahara Desert, because that will throw off all of the predictions. It's like, it's so ridiculous. But what do you reckon it is, just on the sort of like the psyche level of the atheist secularist? Why do these people have such a chutzpah about their sort of knowledge about they think because they do science, or whatever that sort of definition is according to them,
right,
that they essentially just know, like, where does the chutzpah come from these scientists?
Well, I mean, they come from basically a foundational background, so they're using evidentialism for their ultimate sort of epistemic criteria. So they're kind of stuck in a presup of naturalism, and the best way to knowledge is science, which isn't something you could prove with science. It's a philosophical problem that I bring up a lot with these debates. So I don't know, without like armchair psychologizing them, I would be fair and add there's a ton of people who believe in God and even call themselves Christians who try to latch on to an evolutionary view. And being that we all went through the Karunka phase in our life, I think there's a portion of that, Jake, that's social pressure. Honestly, I try to bring a little bit charitability to some people because I remember believing in evolution without really getting into questions about it. Like I just kind of like took it ad hoc. Like, oh yeah, well they know better, right? These dumb theists don't know anything. Like obviously I'm going to trust the science people to say I came from an ape and then, the ape came from a fish back in the day or whatever. But I think there's a social element where you just don't have the blowback that you'd get for denying evolution, similar to like denying the moon landing or something. The blowback you get socially isn't worth the hill that you're dying on, I think, for most people. I think that's going on a lot. Now, obviously, I'm Orthodox Christian, so I think everything comes down to there's a spiritual element. But if I were to put that on the side, I think feeling the need to be a part of the collective group that holds a view, I think is still a spiritual issue, but it's a pragmatic explanation for why people adopt beliefs that they never really pressed on. They don't care. Most of the people I bring this up with don't even really care in the end anyway. They're just like, yeah, well, I don't know, maybe. I'm not that committed, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly interesting. I mean, there's a lot of spurgs in the chat, by the way, guys, about this.
Definitely.
And I'm really enjoying reading the comments. And if anybody actually does, I'm happy to take callers. We've got about another 45 minutes or so until Andrew does his debate on whatever. We'll probably raid over there. But if anybody does want to come on, just message me on X. And I'm sure Jim Bob would be happy to.
It's my favorite. This is like, dude, I'll make a whole stream just bringing up comments, just straight up the comments and going at them. I mean, that's my favorite part.
If I see any good comments here that are actually providing something that resembles an argument, then I will bring them up rather than you're saying you're just an idiot or whatever. But
that's right.
Any actual arguments, I would love to actually hear them and bring them up because this is what I'm doing. I'm curious about the arguments, and to me, from what I've watched, obviously I'm not as really much of a science guy. It takes me a little bit longer to interpret these sorts of things than your regular streamer, but it seems to me like the evolution argument just has a lot of pitfalls that just can't even be explained by even the best of them. Yeah. The how it actually happens one is just the one that gets me. Surely they've got something there where they can explain to you how it happens. If you had to steelman it.
No, I asked all the smarty pants, Jake, and Forrest Valkai was a perfect one. You could find the part of my stream where I just ask him straight up, like how does this process, how does a random mutation, plural, process produce these really specialized things? Like, and the more I look into the specialized things, like I mentioned before, the vestibular system, the like a 3-part command center with these like hair-like highway systems of very precise, sensitive fluid. That basically almost like a gyroscope, right? Keeps our balance, keeps our ability to have spatial awareness, right? It's so hypersensitive and electrical too. It's electrical and hypersensitive. And I just asked, like, okay, that is a thing, right? And they go, yeah, that's how that works. And I go, so you're saying random mutation produced the factory line that produced that hyper specialized thing that keeps us spatially aware and balanced? Tell me how it happens. They then just avoid it. The other part, Jake, that really gets them, and this one really pisses them off. Evolution doesn't make its way through the basic scientific method. It doesn't make its way. They are furious. Everyone I've ever debated who brought this up, I ask them very calmly, does evolution make it through the scientific method? Surely if you're calling something the most wildly accepted scientific theory, at minimum, it would pass the scientific method. That would be like, easy peasy, first door. And yet It doesn't. It doesn't go from observation to a viable hypothesis to a manipulated experiment to the end point, which is the repeatability such that you can develop a thing called a
so the
scientific theory.
repeatability is where it falls over in terms of the scientific method.
Yeah, and the well, it's actually number 2, definitely the repeatability. But to repeat something in an experiment, you actually have to have access to some viable. You have to have a viable hypothesis. That is to say, you have to be able to have something in your possession that you could manipulate, such that you can repeat anything. Like anything else, we have access to, and we introduce, and we can actually manipulate with the thing we're saying is causing this thing. So if they say random mutation causes, the olfactory system, right, from not having it, the scientific way to demonstrate that would be to use random mutation, manipulate it so that it starts producing these types of things like that have function and not purpose. They don't like purpose. They have function, and they can't do it. They can't do it.
Interesting, dude. I can't believe that. That's such a kill shot. That's such a good argument that it doesn't get through the very scientific method to the people who call you science.
Anti-science. It's hilarious.
Like a killer argument.
It's hilarious. And then you know what they do? They go, "Oh, you're such an idiot. You think that scientific theories need to go through the scientific method?" And I'm like, "Yeah. How do you arbitrate between two of them then? If they don't go through the method, how do you arbitrate between two competing ones?" They go, "You just look at more data," and that's the problem of underdetermination of data. That's why they don't. I think, Jake, people are studying science, maybe in STEM. I think they shorten the amount of time that they do the philosophy of science portion. I think that's what's happening.
Yeah, I saw you and Jay were mentioning this one as well, and maybe we'll talk about that in a minute. But Crusader here, guys, has said, message Jake on X, Jake RattleSNK, if you guys want to come on and actually pose your questions to Jim Bob, because a lot of people who seem to be in vehement disagreement with Jim Bob, and I would love to see any good arguments.
They can only
against
gaslight, they can only gaslight, and I get it in my own chat, and I keep them around. They make it fun, but the scoffing is more a demonstration that you can't really contend with anything I'm saying. All you can do is dismiss me and say, "Oh, you idiot, everyone agrees with evolution." And then I go, "What are they actually agreeing on? Can you explain what's happening?" And the other people do that. Other people defend my beliefs for me. Okay.
Yeah, well, Mighty Maximus has been an absolute champion today, guys. We're on 14 out of 50 for the goal. I reckon we might even be able to get there.
Nice.
20, 10, 10, just lighting it up. You love to see it, really. Thank you, Mighty Maximus. Appreciate that. Chris Dealney came in and said, because this is happening. Much appreciated. The Cut said, if at 1 year you have a reptile and year 100 it's a human, don't they have to be able to label/name each evolution by year? Isn't that alone a defeater?
Well, even if it's not by year, I think this question brings up a really good point that I bring up in these conversations is if one thing over time becomes another, how many times does the thing itself change into another, right? That's a fair question. If there's a thing called like the Pakicetus, this land thing that's dipping its toes in the water and thinking about becoming a whale, if that's one thing and it reproduces and it's one species and that's what it is, and it over time becomes a whale, how many iterations of kinds are there between the two? And how would you know? Right?
I'm imagining some wolf whales sort of creatures that are like swimming on all fours, like doggy paddle sort of thing.
Yeah.
Like,
well, like think about this. Like you have to learn how to hunt underwater, and you have to develop your apparatuses to orientate yourself underwater as opposed to land. How could you have a gradualistic approach of that? Like you could only imagine it in your head, honestly. You couldn't describe it though. That's the thing that I think was crucial, Jake, that you pointed out, which is most people, they'll use words like imagine when I ask these questions a lot. They'll be like, well, imagine. I'm like, wait, I need you to describe the process of a land animal over time gradually becoming a whale through some like genetic succession of generations and adopting tools for the water incidentally, not on purpose. Not on purpose.
Yeah.
Incidentally.
Is there any in-between iterations or no?
No, you can't. There's nothing that you can demonstrate changes, even if you introduce some stimuli that was aggressive. There's nothing that changes into another thing. So what they have is at the micro level is they'll take bacteria or fungus or mosquitoes or something like this, and they'll introduce some sort of thing that alters its genetics, often disabling the population. And then they say, look, this new population can't have sex and reproduce with the previous one. It's a new species or whatever. And you go, well, is it still a mosquito? And they go, well, yeah, it's a mosquito. So the point is, they can't really tell you an example of one thing actually becoming another. And they'll say, well, of course we can't. That requires a lot of time. And I go, yeah, that's question begging.
Right.
That's the thing in question.
Red Fox comes in again, says, E. coli experiment is currently going to prove evolution, how scientists have been modifying it, and the bacteria is still bacteria. However, science have been this is support to create new evidence. This is support to create new evidence because all current evidence is circular.
Yeah, that's a good point. And guess what? Insofar as like even when they experiment with like, they're trying to figure out origin of life through some sort of chemical reaction or whatever.
Right.
When they do that inside of an intentional space with humans, they're actually demonstrating one thing is that a mind was required intentionally to make the thing that they're making. So it's like it ends up coming back to engineering, which is mind dependent. And so it's kind of funny that all of the search for a naturalistic explanation for the existence of things is always utilizing a mind with intention to reproduce the thing to begin with.
Okay, well, consciousness is the thing that is really baffling to me, because when you were talking to Professor Dave, the interesting part was when you were talking about purpose. Does the brain have a purpose? In order for him to answer yes to that question, he's obviously stuck in a trap there, because in order for him to say yes to that question, he would have to assume that anything has purpose. The notion of purpose is sort of metaphysical notion of purpose exists in and of itself. So first of all, explain to me why you use that particular question.
Yeah, well, I actually moving away from that question because they could think purpose to mean like rays of light on your head. I figured out my purpose in the grand scheme of the universe. It's and even though that's related, right? Whether it's at the grand scale or the molecular scale, the question is still the same. So I actually moving forward, I ask a different question now, which is, does anything in biology incorrectly function? Incorrectly. Is there anything called dysfunction? Like if you went to the doctor and he said you have your heart isn't properly functioning, it's not functioning correctly, that would answer the question I would need from them. Because if they say yes, it's possible for a heart to function incorrectly, they're actually giving the heart purpose. Now, I'm not like I don't want to lose the audience or my opposition by saying the word purpose. And this is a workaround. So they'll come to the same conclusion. If you say something incorrectly operates, you're actually supposing that there's a inherent way it should operate. That's purpose. That's just another way of saying purpose. We're not talking about higher purpose, what my life's purpose is. We're talking about functional purpose. Functional, what's the utility? Does the brain exist to think? Okay, Dave, no. How do you know you're properly thinking then if the inherent use of the brain is not to think? How do you know you're properly thinking? They don't have an answer for this. Same with the heart, same with the liver, same with the lungs, anything else in the body. They can't really say it's incorrectly performing. That would assume it has some sort of directionality. It doesn't, from their view.
Can I show you a video really quickly? I found this on Instagram the other day and I've just managed to send it to myself. This one instead. I think this is the argument essentially. Darwinism.
Wow. Pretty much. Pretty much. Mm-hmm. There's Grandpa. Why not? There we go. Nice. Nice. Get up there. Get up there. Get up there. Become a... Yeah, there we go. I was wondering when you're gonna do that.
Oh, it's
beautiful.
really tickled my funny bone, man.
It's so beautiful. And then it has a massive city, yeah.
Yep. AI is crazy, bro.
I used to hate it. Now I'm coming around to AI.
So that's pretty much
Excellence.
That's pretty much it.
Yeah, and that's how it should be treated. You know, we've been gaslit for so long. It's been generations, right, that we've been gaslit. And now we're, you know, I think we should push back pretty hard with the rhetoric as well. You know, I could make you feel crazy too, Evo-tards. I can do it too.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so moving on now, just quickly, the consciousness thing. Do the evolutionists or the Evo-tards, whatever you call them, do they have an actual explanation for consciousness or a theory that points to why human beings are able to have rational faculties?
Yeah, they use the term emergent property. So they just appeal to emergentism, and they say like, well, consciousness is just a higher state property of the brain in motion. That doesn't get them out of their epistemic problem because, and here's why. If from their view, everything ultimately is naturalistic, this came up with my debate with Peterson back in Nashville. If their brain is just in motion and completely dictated by chemical reactions and the laws of physics, anything that's produced from it, let's say it's consciousness, whatever they think that is, let's say that's vapor coming off the water of the brain, right? Equivalent to that. That's all deterministic anyway. Like, so everything they believe and say is all just another event in motion. It's completely determined, which once you get them to admit this, you ask them, why are you so upset that other people don't believe something if from your view, they were determined to hold that position anyway from their brain, right? And so this is a big problem because determinism is the entailment of evolution from this perspective because states of affairs, a waterfall, a cloud, a rainstorm, a river, a blade of grass, none of these things are truth apt. They're not truth apt. They just happen, right? They're just happenings.
They're things that happen.
Yeah, they're just things that happen. But truth aptness needs consciousness to not be a strict event, and here's why. If events in nature aren't true or false, you don't point to a true waterfall or a true blade of grass. It just is an event, an object in space. If your thinking is just another set of events, just like the weather, just like a blade of grass, just like a fart, there's no standard to call it a true thought or a false thought or a true proposition or a false proposition. A true philosophy, a good philosophy, or a bad philosophy. They don't have access to that because their own brain, according to them, like Dave said, is just accidental, random processes, chemical reactions. How could you say, Jake, that your chemical reactions are false, but mine are true?
I actually don't know. I'm trying to think about how I would steelman that argument if I was one of them. I mean, I would probably say something along the lines of my chemical reactions or My Chemical Romance has like a different sort of set of outcomes that would be more beneficial to the thriving of human society.
Well, that wouldn't be truth. That would go back to Plantinga's problem, which is you can have false beliefs that are advantageous to your survival. If everyone believed in a type of dominant God that said, go forth, multiply, and take resources for your own so that your genetics survive above the others, that false belief could give you a pretty pragmatic approach to domination, wouldn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
So, Yeah, it's a problem. And I think the further we go and the more people understand about the body and biology and how precise it is and in its tasks and how those tasks are related to other tasks, like you said earlier, that this is like a complex city planning, if you will, of the body. These schemas, to say that they are products of something that's random is to pretty much go up against everything you inductively and deductively know about the world. And so I think they're insane people.
Did you ever watch the debate between Sam Harris and William Lane Craig?
Yes.
So, from what I understand, William Lane Craig has the Kalam cosmological argument, and essentially what he argues is that evolution is real, but evolution is real in the sense that it is a part of God's design and God's ultimate plan for the world. Is that correct?
Yeah, he has basically a lot of heretical beliefs. William Lane Craig did excellent in completely destroying Sam Harris's moral landscape just from a straight argument. But the problem with the modern classical foundationalist Christians, I put that in quotes, like William Lane Craig, is they're trying to maintain a bunch of assumptions that are unjustified to begin with, like the certain ages of things, or the idea that animals can change into other animals to begin with. Now, I don't know if that's academic social pressure from him. I can't pretend to speculate and come to the knowledge of it, but I know that what he tries to defend ultimately falls apart for the same reason I would, the same problems I brought up today. He has the same problem, even though he believes a God is using evolution. From a Christian perspective, Jake, there's a big problem here, specifically Christian, is that if evolution was true, if you could conceive of it, right, that would mean man, in this case Adam, was actually the product of something that wasn't Adam. So that would, first of all, mean God didn't make man. He made something else that became man through some process that was not really random, because it was God fidgeting with bacteria, and God actually made that animation that you just played that we laughed at, right? So he made that happen. But the problem with that is evolution assumes sex and reproduction and death. And so you have a Genesis problem, death before the fall. You have one problem. You also have a philosophical problem of the metaphysics of what it means to be human. If we're made in the image of God, and that entails that our body, mind, and spirit are geared toward knowing God and being like God through theosis, from the evolutionary view, we didn't always have that. There has to be this arbitrary moment where beast becomes man, where we suddenly take on this image bearer status, right? But the problem with that is that our own father at some point would be a beast. If that point was delineated, that means you could turn your dad into like animal husbandry, like go plow the fields, beast, And then there's another problem, though. When Christ takes on humanity, humanity needs to be a universal. That means a universal static category. Under the evolutionary view, it's not a static category, right? It's this changing flux category, which means nominalism is that there's only particular things. Christ, if you granted Christ came and took on the, quote, human nature, he only took on one beast nature, his own. That's it. It wasn't a static universal human nature. He also took on a nature that was beast. So God, Christ himself, the second person, incarnates as a beast from that view.
Right. And there's not really, like, they're kind of like our cousins in that sense. There's not really that much of a distinction between man and animal. So he's kind of there to give the animals salvation as well, perhaps.
Well, yeah, it's arbitrary. So, like, let's say we push the time forward, and it takes more time than we actually could imagine for Christ to come back to judge the living and the dead. What human is, right? If evolution continued, it could be just a bunch of hunched over platypus creatures that are trying to do liturgy, right? Like they can't and he's like, that's another problem, like moral culpability. The reason we as humans look at other animals and we don't hold them culpable morally, we don't have bear jail. We don't have lion justice. Like that's humans. That's a human thing. And if evolution was conceptually true, you would also have an arbitrary point at which you sort of made beasts culpable, new beasts,
Right.
new human beasts, even though they would be surrounded with other humans who had the same capacity as them, who made sounds, who did things, who built things, who had boats or whatever. And you'd be like, no, you're a beast. We're culpable. You're not.
Yeah.
But yeah, so suddenly you have to make this distinction between a previous beast. That's why I argue, even without the theistic lens, how does the evolution proponent know when human as a category was officially itself as a category? Right, in time.
Yeah, that's the thing. When you can see the various adaptations of the dogs in different places, like we were saying before, and of the different humans. Like humans are obviously different depending on where they've sort of proliferated in the world.
Right.
Mongolians are different to Anglo-Saxons, but when do they not become humans? But
They don't have
this
an
is maybe this is a dumb question, but where are the in between? And I know that there's people who are going to make a joke about this, but where are the in between us and the ape? Where is
Well,
Where
it's
can
but
we
they wouldn't
find
say
them?
that. They wouldn't say that. They would correct you and say the ape and us, or something that looks similar to us, have an ancestor that's similar. So we both came. We're at two different points of a V. They wouldn't say we came from this and there must be an in between. They're saying that we came from an intersection where we both shared something. But the problem with that is, like, on their trees, they have to keep going back, right? They have to keep going back and saying this is the point where we diverged. And you go and you ask the same question. What's the criterion for divergence, where one thing becomes a human, you call it a human, and another thing that's like a human that it comes from back in the day, how do you know what do you mean that's not a human? Like, what is it? Like, what are these things and what distinguishes them? And they admit, no, it's totally arbitrary. It's taxonomy is, all of it's arbitrary. Clades are arbitrary. Species are arbitrary. The beginning of a clade is arbitrary. The beginning of a species, like if you said a species is an animal that can, in isolation, reproduce with its own kind, there are lizards that are asexual that are essentially cloners. They reproduce asexually with their own selves, like themselves, right? And so are they a new clade? Are they a new species?
If only feminists could do that, dude, they would be off to the races.
Oh, they're
man. They'd
probably
have the highest birth rates.
Dude, I bet there's study groups trying to make that happen, is to go back to like some, try to take a woman and make them like a starfish, like asexual, like a starfish or an aphid or whatever. And the Aphid Society. I bet a lot of transhumanism, evolution, that's a whole another topic, honestly, Jake, is like transhumanism, evolution, the Troons movement. Philosophically, it all ties together. It's all coming from a same position that everything's transformative, right? There's no real objective truth to the matter. There aren't universal static truths about things. It's all in flux, bro.
Yeah, I mean, let's read out a few of these supers that are coming in here, and then I want to talk about the more viable or apt solutions you think, or descriptions of nature that are better. Isaac Hayes says, could a viable hypothesis be that God created evolution and that evolution really did happen? Also, do you think the Earth is roughly 4.5 billion years old, or roughly 10,000 years old according to Genesis? We kind of just did cover that, the viable hypothesis, the Kalam cosmological argument.
I would say I wouldn't even. You're using hypothesis colloquially. I'm really a stickler for the term. When we talk about God, we're actually talking about a paradigm. It wouldn't be technically a hypothesis. I know that's like a annoying move, but I think it's important to distinguish. Hypotheses, generally speaking, in science, in nature, we're talking about science. We're talking about like causal relations, what causes what, and so forth. As far as like a schema. I don't think it's viable to say God created a thing called evolution, because from our view, God, first of all, we went through the Christian aspect. But if you're going to go non-Christian, God creating a process that's incoherent to understand would be the first problem. Like if you created a process and you're like arguing the process of evolution, but it's incoherent when you describe it, like it can't be defended coherently, I would say maybe that idea is not from God.
Anthony said, when they say we share 98 to 99% DNA with chimps, and supposedly it was 6 to 7 million years ago just to change 1%, how long would it take under that math to change over 20 or 30 or 40%?
Yeah, there are people doing great work as far as the math problems. I don't know the answer to that, but the question itself of math and probability is insanely against evolution as a reasonable belief. Once you get into certain aspects of the math, I encourage a lot of people to look into some of these problems of math that have been lingering, but kind of pushed to the side by academia, and now you can't ignore them. They're rising to the surface again. So,
The Cut said, JB, have you ever asked how an aquatic biology could switch to a land animal biology over time without everything dying off?
No, but this is a question that no matter what the circumstances are, become a problem. Like, for instance, if you look at their sort of dinosaur narrative of like a meteor taking out all the dinosaurs, but there has to be a survivor that we then come from, like that's the entailment, right? They have to then tell a story of why anything survived, right? If it was such a catastrophe, on what basis do they determine what survives and why? And then how do we come from those things, right? And then further, how do things that are in the process of developing advantages, accidentally, how do they survive, right? They have to say, well, they survived because they already had the capacity to anyway. So they didn't need to develop anything, because clearly, if you have enough time to develop an apparatus, then you're surviving quite well and reproducing quite well. You don't actually need the apparatus if it takes 50 million years to make one, right? You don't need it. It's just an accident, right?
Great questions today, guys. Great questions. Mighty Maximus sends 3 in. Thank you very much, sir. Much appreciated. Mighty Maximus, been massive today. Mudwork says, I like my oopsie poopsie argument. It goes like this. In order for an organism to exist, it has to consume food. The food must be processed and expelled, but the digestive system, poo, is accidental and purposeless oopsie poopsie.
Oopsie poopsie, oh, that's my favorite one, Mud.
That's a good one. The unplugged beta. I don't know if you've heard the rep, but the unplugged alpha is the guy who Andrew Wilson just debated, and he's got.
Right.
I like what he's done there. It says a planetary Adam and Eve, full gift of physical grace to mortal races. No immediate interbreeding between people of garden and the world remain biological segregated from evolution. Mortals while they build up race of their order. Do you understand that?
Full gift of physical grace, mortal graces, interbreeding. No, not really. I mean, it sounds like he's given an account of a more broad paradigm description.
Brandalorian says, Get a Life Ministries is currently doing a series called Witness of Creation. It shows how God is real from the telescope to the microscope. It has helped convince me of creation using science. Know much about that, Jim Bob?
Not so much. I like looking at stuff like that. I do know that when people look deeper into science and math, there are questions, if they're honest, that they admit can't possibly be answered by science and mathematical descriptions. So,
all right. So I want to go into consciousness, guys. Last chance to get some questions in. We will read out a few more at the end here, but I do want to go into the idea. Sorry, we went through consciousness, but now the idea of a better explanation for life. So you said before that you were sort of arguing from their home ground. I think that that's a smart thing to do when you're attacking their position and comparing worldviews. But now in terms of your own worldview, from the Orthodox Christian perspective, tell me what you think is a more accurate description of how life has come to be.
Well, I believe that the existence that we have isn't as aged as they believe, right? For various reasons. Not only it's doctrinal, but their conception of age doesn't make any sense, because when they say the earth is this age, based on this model, the Earth needs a birth date. That means you have to determine when the Earth, from that view, aggregation of unrelated matter comes together as a ball, right, from space. It's made up of things that all have different origins. So you can't say the age of the Earth from an empirical naturalistic perspective anyway. So
well,
that
just
seems
there's just too many variables again. It's just too difficult to actually accurately say that.
Well, no, it's not that it's difficult. It's you can't say, like, for instance, look at it this way: if the Earth is the aggregation of gravity coming of unrelated particular matter coming together, all of the unrelated matter that comes together and makes the Earth pre-existed. So that the age of each of those things are now in question. So if you grant them this time frame,
at what point did it become the Earth?
Become right. Yeah. Well, notice, isn't it interesting that this kind of philosophy of the beginning of the Earth is ambiguous, and it reflects the ambiguity these people have with the beginning of life, when a life begins, right? So their perspective actually can't say the age of anything because it's all made of pre-existing matter anyway. So what does that even mean from their cosmic perspective? That's one reason I reject that. As far as a model, things like clades only make sense if there is initial starting objective, umbrella, static, universal category. Things that are dog-like, things that are this, things that are that. It makes sense that if those things are made and they start from a very objective position, it makes sense that breeding and variation can come forth pretty rapidly. Now, that's another reason I hold to this view is the further you look into adaptation and the kinds of changes we see among animals of their own kind, right? They're already in a category. These things actually happen rapidly, these kinds of changes. It never results in something becoming something it's not, though. But it can rapidly change. So this idea of like the counter argument against a young Earth or a Christian conception of reality from this perspective is, well, we have dating methods. Well, those could be questioned. There's too many different animals for it to be short period of time. Well, no, the more we look at adaptation, it's actually showcasing that you could have a speedy amount of changes within animals. Adaptation could happen very quickly. The question is whether or not you think that could result in an animal somehow exiting its current category at some point and becoming a new category. I think that's logically impossible. It doesn't even make sense.
Right. So a more accurate explanation of all of the different species that exist and everything. Obviously, you believe in God. You're an Orthodox Christian. You believe that they were all made individually by God, and that these different categories exist and were created, and then can only really flourish within their categories. They can't become a different category.
Yeah, and to say changes could happen within a category is to hold firm to that a category exists to begin with. So even their cladistics makes more sense from a Christian paradigm, because if they don't have a standard for a clade and it's totally ambiguous and changing, it's totally like it's just wet, it's fluid, like the genders, right, from their perspective. There's no referent for it. Reference themselves, this is why a tag argument, when we talk about fundamental reality, we're actually not just talking about the physical world at all. This comes up with every debate I have. If it's, with Peterson back in Nashville, what makes sense of reality? A purely naturalistic view or a theistic view or a Christian view? Well, I went through the reasons why a Christian view makes more sense of reality, because reality itself includes metaphysics, conceptual, the conceptual realm, logic, math. These aren't found in nature. So, I mean, I question it, like Jay would say, from a paradigm level. And so if you go from a paradigm level, these people are defeated because they have to hold to things that are true that they have no evidence for. There's no evidence for knowledge and information and categories and meaning and numbers and their mind. Like, these are not empirical claims, and yet here they are using them, right? They're using tools from the Christian tool belt and being like, I just have these tools. I don't need to know where they come from. Well, no, that doesn't work. You can't do that. That's ad hoc.
Yeah. So logic is always the one that sort of gets me here. It's like, logic is something that we obviously can't create. We can't change the laws of logic. We have to then observe logic. The only reason why we know it is because we've observed it. But then, in order to not contradict yourself, then obviously you have to observe the laws of logic and you have to adhere to it. And if you do that, then you won't make any sense. But can you try and steel man it for me? Because it's difficult for me to actually take this tag argument. And because, sometimes when you have a debate or before a debate, you would have the debate in your head and attack it from the other person's perspective to try and see how they're going to try and counter you. When you do that with the tag argument and you're thinking, I'm going to go up against the high level guy, what is the argument you think that they're going to make to you? About logic, for example.
Well, they're going to say logic is descriptive. They're going to try to say it's grammatical or descriptive, but we have to be very precise what we mean by logic. We're not talking about doing logic, like the practice, like doing math. We're talking about the laws of logic, the classical laws. So the first thing you have to do is be specific with what you mean by logic. We're talking about the 3 laws of logic. And so law of identity, excluded middle, non-contradiction. Those are preconditions for describing anything. So when someone says they're descriptive, that doesn't make sense because you can't describe something without first appealing to the laws of logic. So that approach I expect, right? Oh, they're descriptive. Well, no, they're not descriptive because even from their view, there was a time in which reality operated before any humans came on the scene and started reading and writing. Well, did that reality abide by the law of identity? Yes. Well, if it did, then the law of identity, the laws of logic need a type of ontology that is not identical to matter. And you can lead them into this path and they lose their minds because they're like, no, the laws of logic only existed when humans started describing. Really? That denies a past then. That means there's no conceivable, realistic past that you can appeal to. Bye-bye evolution.
Yeah, I was trying to explain the morality debate the other day. There's a debate that I would love to go over. You and I can critique this debate. I don't know if you've seen it. This guy, Aubrey Marcus, the other week had on this guy, Dr. D. Martini. Did you see this?
Not yet, but he's my favorite to critique is Aubrey Marcus. He's my favorite.
Yeah. It's pretty funny. But he had this doctor on. This doctor was basically a moral anti-realist. It would be an interesting one for us to go over sometime. I'm working on a script about it. But I was talking about morality and thinking, as a Christian, we would believe in universals in terms of morality. So we would believe that even if there weren't humans, it would still be wrong to eat a baby. But would that be accurate?
Say that last part again.
So even if humans did not exist, it would still be wrong to eat a baby.
Well, that's a baby would have to exist, right? So
yeah, but if humans did exist, and then they didn't exist, like would that, and then
conceptually, yeah, it would be like from a Christian conception, like theoretically, if the action was possible, right? Just theoretically. The action was possible to an action being possible to move away from God, that would still exist, right? The action against God would be a precondition for any creature to act against God. So that would just mean that God would need to exist positively. So the real question is, for anything to be immoral, it needs to have there needs to be a positive ontology for good, such that it could even hypothetically, theoretically be acted against, metaphysically or actually. And so the metaphysic possibility of acting against God perhaps has some type of possible existence before creation even, maybe. I'm not sure. That's a good question, but it sounds like it's a tough question because the hypothetical, you have to imagine the thing that you're saying doesn't exist anymore. So it's like, can an action that's not possible anymore still be evil? Can the action itself, but the possibility of the action is no longer possible, right?
So what's a better example then, if you were talking about morality and morality being something that exists absent human consciousness, like we didn't create morality, we can't change it. If morality is a universal, then what would be a better example of what we could say?
Well, I would just say we can't even talk about morality insofar as it being objective. It has to have a positive existence. So I would always start from, well, God before creation, his very nature is that positive existence of good. That doesn't mean that in actuality that it's possible to act against him, because act would assume there's a secondary causality available, like a being, right? So, if God only existed before creation, God can't act against himself, hypothetically, metaphysically, or actually. And so it's like, to use an analogy, maybe like I use light, like it's like asking, like, if light didn't exist temporally, would it be possible for shadows to exist? If light didn't exist, like the possibility of light didn't exist,
it would just
could
be
a shadow?
darkness,
Yeah, just
there
be,
can't be a shadow.
Yeah. That's why the hypothetical is a little bit wonky to me. It's a little bit wonky.
So, but would it be better to then use mathematics or logic as opposed to morality when you're speaking about universals and how they would exist absent human consciousness or absent humans even existing? Or do we just need to have the humans to observe them?
No. All universals would have to be grounded in God. Otherwise, like, even before, now the question is, like, this is where you'd move over to someone like Jay, more technically speaking. What is the way in which these universals exist ontologically, right?
Yeah.
In God, right? So, that's out of my wheelhouse. But what's in my wheelhouse is to say conceptually anything is universally absolutely true, or universally in the sense that it's a category even, is to assume that there's some grounding for it to begin with, that it's unchangeable. So that would be God. The only thing that could be even conceptually unchanging, you'd be moving closer definitionally to God. Even in a broad sense, you'd be moving toward something that's invariant, absolute, has a mind of some kind, right? To ground unchanging conceptual invariant laws and things like this. That's why the laws of logic are one of my favorite things to point to necessitate something be outside of the human brain, outside of the human mind. Yeah.
Last few here, super chats, guys. Last chance to send in a chat if you want to ask Jim Bob something as well. The Unplugged Beta is back for 20, saying life carriers and various orders of angels. The life carriers, a subordinate personality entrusted with establishing physical life on evolving worlds. It's cosmic administration, guys, for the grift.
I like cosmic administration. I mean, it sounds a little Mormon-y, but I think I know what you're saying.
And Tiffany came in and said, my 13-year-old son has a question. What would your argument be against the intermediates, Seymoria, Archaeotyperics, and Tiktaalik?
I think it's all question begging. Tiktaalik, they're trying to say, if we predict a sea creature that seems to have the capacity to move around to us, that reminds us of walking, therefore this is an instance of an entire group of animals slowly walking out of the water. Well, there are animals like mud skippers and things that exist today, unchanged, still doing the same thing in and out of water with their flippers. So, Tiktaalik definitely doesn't affirm anything. The other problem with these fossils is that when a fossil shows up outside of their predictive model, they just rename it a new species, or just say, no, that must be an anomaly or something, right? They say, nuh-uh. So, no, the whole point is the concept of intermediates, right, assumes a process they can't explain, right? They can't explain the process of how something becomes another. And so instead of explaining a process for how something becomes another, they look at similar things that they think are like a timestamp moment of one becoming the other. Well, look, it's like this, but it's at a different stage, and it must be becoming this thing. No, that's just all storytelling, the whole thing.
Last one here. Oh, got a couple more, actually. How do you explain hominins, ape men like Homo erectus? They seem like the in-between species.
It's the same problem as the last question. To say in-between, right, is to assume the thing in question is that there's some sort of transition that's happening that's never been observed to begin with, nor can it be explained at the granular level anyway. So when you find things that look human-like, right, You're finding things that look human-like, right? Naming them arbitrarily doesn't give you this process of in-betweenness. In-between is an event. Fossils, bones, they're not events. They're not events. That's the problem. The philosophical problem is the evolution proponent adds their philosophy to objects and makes up events in between objects. I call that just like my kid does that. It's called storytelling.
Yeah. And we've got Chris Taylor coming in and saying, I know logic and morality are different, but related systems, but wouldn't one need to assume some moral truths to even use logic, such as I should follow the laws of logic? That's an interesting one.
Yeah, that's a good one, Chris. This comes up in argumentation. I do it in a less formal way. I ask the atheist when they come to debate me or whatever, I say, do you have any reason why we should pursue truth? Is it a moral position? Is it a meta-ethical position? Why should we be consistent? Why should we come to true beliefs? Why? There's no reason from their perspective. And that, Chris, that's another way of asking the same question. Yes, morality and truth are related.
I guess they would say because it's handy, because it's useful, and it helps us with doing science. If we
Pragmatic, pragmatism. Yeah. Okay, well then, I can use it to take over the world.
ZX says light only truly exists without dark, and vice versa. You know,
No.
50 Cent said something similar. A great philosopher said, you know,
50
without
Cent.
sunshine there is no rain, without joy there is no pain, etc.
No. Yeah, I would say no to this. Light has its own ontology, even from the physics perspective of being energy and being able to transform its state. But dark is the absence of something. It doesn't have its own ontology. So no, to say light only truly exists with dark is to give dark its own ontology. It doesn't have its ontology. So this is a dualistic problem. Yeah.
50 was wrong because
Yeah.
50 was actually, to be honest, he was saying sunny days wouldn't be special if it wasn't for rain. Joy wouldn't feel so good if it wasn't for pain. Death got to be easy because life is hard. It'll leave you physically and mentally and emotionally scarred. So a little bit different.
A little bit.
But he was correct, though. In a sense, he was correct, you know, because he was more talking about the experiences of joy and pain.
I just want to add one more thing, another example in case that guy didn't get it. The same problem with heat. What we call cold is our way of measuring the absence of heat. It doesn't have its own ontology. There's no positive thing called that. It's the absence of something.
Well, Jim Bob, I appreciate you coming on. And maybe next week we can do that, where we go through that Aubrey Marcus.
That would be funny.
That would be really fun to do if you're available at a similar time next week. Because I've got all the timestamps of it. I've been watching it pretty closely, that whole interview debate sort of thing.
Yeah, that sounds right on my alley, dude.
They're both so fun to critique because Aubrey Marcus comes from this this worldview of New Age spirituality where everything is some sort of a big buffet breakfast of all the different religions that create some sort of a cosmic smoothie of whatever, some spiritual cosmic smoothie.
Yeah,
and then you've got this doctor who's a moral anti-realist who's constantly making various different normative claims.
Where it got awkward. He shut it down because he was like, listen.
He tried to.
Listen, eating. Yeah, that's actually, we should do that. We should definitely do that.
All right, yeah. We'll find a time, but appreciate you coming on today, man. But let's do that next week.
Absolutely, dude. I'm still streaming, so when we close off it in StreamYard, I'm just going to come back to my stream.
I'm going to probably stick with the stream for a little bit.
Oh, that's right, yeah. All right, man. Thanks, Jake. God bless. See you, man.
Take care, man. See ya.
Bye.
All righty, guys. Hope you all enjoyed that as much as I did. Really, really interesting stuff. Mr. E is being a great man.
All righty, guys. That was fun. Reclaimer. I don't trust a damn thing this guy says. If that's true, not that you believe in prayers or anything like that, but there you go. You did ask a question before that I wanted to answer directly. You were like, well, if everything has purpose, why do men have nipples and glands, right? And I told you. That's a consequence of those things being necessary early on. And so if it's necessary for mammary glands before the sex is determined, if those things need to develop, those things are fundamentally a remnant of something that did have purpose. So, and this is true. There's developmental glands through puberty that use and apply their purpose at that time, and they don't continue their purpose. So, the fact that something's remnant of a previous purpose still doesn't. It actually ties it to a purpose. It's actually the opposite. So, that's not a good example. By the way, from a Christian view, it might not even be true that every single thing we point to has to have purpose. It might not be true. I mean, we believe in the fall, so there might be things that are ambiguous, right? It has nothing to do with the evolutionist view, though. My view on the mammary glands, you're assuming that God created everything with pure perfection, and that's the state we're in. That's not even a critique of our own view, dude. Not even close. I trounced Jake, yeah. He tried. Jake tried. He tried. I'm sad that you let them smuggle in share and not make the distinction. Share. When? Share. I did go over share yesterday. I actually worked, I spent about 5, maybe 10 minutes against share yesterday. I didn't grant them share yesterday. Share. They share it. No. Similarities. So the fall added nipples to bed. No, that's not what I said. Gosh, you're so bad faith, dude. You're so bad faith. You refuse. You refuse actively to understand what's being said. You are actually committed. Committed to it. It's like a part of your energy. It's like the full-on, unbridled commitment to not understanding what people are saying. It's amazing. I gotta hand it to you. You're like a teen, like if a demon was a teenager. It's like if a demon was an 8-year-old and refused to sit down for dinner. That's what you're like, dude. It's unbearable, honestly. Unbearable. Don't say you're trying to understand, dude. You're a snarky little prick. That's what you are. You're such a lolcow. I reject you. You can't understand. You're spiritually broken. You're molded. You got spiritual mold. You know what I'm saying? Shame on you. Shame. 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 So much for the pleasant chat. Oh, shut up, dude. You ankle bite all day. You say lies. You say lies about me on your channel, and you're like, oh, the pleasant chat. Shut up. How about that? How's that for pleasant? Shut your face hole. Shut your incidental face hole that's making sounds with no purpose, okay? Rejected. Rejected. Appeal to etiquette. Get out of here, dude. You're like a mangy, ankle-biting little chihuahua, dude. You're like a chihuahua with a fedora. That's what you are, a chihuahua with a fedora. Upset? No, I'm not upset. I don't know how long you've been following me, but this is my demeanor. This is what's humorous to us when I yell at people like this. It's out of love, by the way, even though I hate you. Appreciate you answering my questions in depth with Jake. Hope they made sense. Yeah, thank you for them. They were good. There's some good questions in there. I gotta say, he brought up more. Those were better questions than what we get in most of these debate servers, honestly. Fedora, straight to jail. Nasty little chihuahua. Nasty little chihuahua. He doesn't know what upset is because, you know, he's not a father. So. Any other questions about evolution from you pro-evolution snake tards? Anybody? You greasy little pigeons. You lost little greasy little carrier pigeons. Nothing? Nobody? I'm animating stuff. I got a fun thing for Ortho Thugs tomorrow. I got to make sure to finish it. Did you guys see what's his name was arrested? That's crazy. I don't really cover that stuff, but that's a bit of a eyebrow lifter. Prince Andrew arrested? Is it all show? Is it all show? There's no justice. There's no justice. The memes. Yeah, dude, your memes are horrible, too. Horrible. Oh, just AI slop. Just the lowest level atheist slop I've ever seen. Just slop, dude. I'm glad you're trying to do something creative, though. You know, if I could, even if it's oppositional to me, if I could get someone, a fire lit under someone to do something even slightly creative, I mean, that's good. If evolution is true, does that mean truth can't be found? Yes. There's no ontology of truth from the evolutionary view. But mechanically, it can't be found either. It can't be. Because truth being apprehended is to say that there is an apparatus that can correctly apprehend and process and evaluate truth, even just descriptively. And so I think you know the answer, workhorse. It's a really horrible view, that Evo view. Is he the fall guy? Yeah, that makes sense too. He's the Weinstein. I mean, how dark does it get? How dark does it get? Roof maxing. Reverse them? No, they're not stolen. He doesn't. He AI makes them. It's just AI slop. That's why they're not consistent in their imagery. They're not consistent. But I inspired him, you know? He's like, well, maybe I could make books. Maybe I could sell books. Maybe I could be Jim Bob. Maybe I can live with Jim Bob. Maybe I could try on Jim Bob's shoes. Maybe I can have a fulfilling life. Maybe I won't be so alone. Maybe someone will like me. Maybe my life will have purpose. Maybe I'll find a nice girl. Maybe I'll have family. Maybe Jim Bob help me. Maybe Jim Bob help me. Give me purpose. Give me identity. Maybe I wake up for something, do something in my life. Maybe I get out of bed. Maybe forgive my dada for trying to chest feed me. Maybe. I don't know why that just made me think of a fun runner game. You guys know runner games? It's based in India. you're a European visitor. It's a very fast-paced, moving game. A lot of street stuff going on, a lot of buses. You know how they don't have traffic signs? It's crazy. Chaos. And you have to jump over obstacles, including piles of dung. And you don't even know if they're human or cow. A cow comes barreling through. You got to jump over it, not touch it. There's intense Indian music. And somehow this game, through your phone, is connected to a smell machine, which is essential. Boop, 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 boop. Boop, 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 boop. Maybe Tony can do the music. Weekly reminder: the germ theory's dog water. I haven't really dove into it. I have so little access to it. You know what I mean? I've heard everything. I've heard it all, but I'm like, well, how do I get into that? I'm just listening to people. I don't know how to, you know what I mean? I can't get into it. Like, I want to know where to go. But I can't. And then the people, like, I like lose trust in certain people who are advocating for it or whatever. And I'm like, you're questionable. You know, are you a plant? Are you getting me to believe something and I don't have a good reason? Imitation is the most sincere form of flattery that mediocrity can give to excellence. Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing I can source such creativity in Reclaimer. You know what I mean? It's beautiful. Speaking OG games, there's a new one coming out called Become, where you play sperm. I saw that. I thought it was a joke, Austin. You're a sperm and you're trying to get to the egg, and it's like this long haul. I saw that. Whitney Webb is the only good resource for the e-files. It's such a massive morass of folders. Honestly, I can only pray that in the current justice system, that's the most naive thing that's the most naive position I have currently, is that this idea that the current system can process this level of evil and do something with it. I know it sounds like a black pill. I'm sorry, that's just kind of how I feel about it, you know? That's just how I feel. Let's call it managing expectations. Let's call it that. I'm going to just go with that. What can I say? Oh, thanks, Vagine. Thanks, Vagine. 4? Can we do 4 in 2 minutes? Can you guys get this last goal in 2 minutes? I'm not going to stay on too long. I got animation to do. And there's only there's 350 people here. Might as well set up a raid. Not that, I don't know who's live. Let's see. Got Andrew doing whatever. Oh, guess what? This dude stated clearly, I'll do this probably tomorrow. He's got part 2 of the flagella evolution. We're going to dive into that for sure. You know the guy with the soft voice who doesn't answer any questions? He's like this. He sent us Rapture. Where? Hold on. Sorry. Okay, here we go. I may have missed it, but do you happen to speak on the BS dating methods and fossil? A little bit. The dating methods, what I ask Raptured West is how they determine margin of error when they get into dates where they have no reference for them anymore. So in other words, you can use a dating method in the here now against something that you have access to the birth of, and you could see how accurate it is. But the problem is, the further you go as so far as age, how do you determine how far the margin of error is going, right? And usually what they say, Raptured West, is they go, well, we measure it against this other thing, other dating method. And I'm like, I'm going to have the same question for you. Same question. There's also, like, it came up with Jake, is the philosophical question, because they always talk about, like, even, forget fossils, like age of the earth, age of this, age of that. It's a big problem, right? If from their view, the earth is just made composite of a bunch of unrelated matter that pre-existed the shape of the earth, then the age of the earth is the age of a particular thing that predated the earth. So how do you know the age of that thing? That's clearly not the age of the earth. The same way, if you found a flute made out of wood, the age of the wood is not the age of the flute. That's not true. That ain't it. Cleve, Nikolai, and patristic faith. Patristic faith. Sabo? Dude, what happened to that guy? Remember Sabo? He did some fun art, pretty edgy art, pro-Trump art, 2016. What happened to him? He's got 2 live viewers. What happened? There are trees that are older than 6,000 years. I mean, possibly. But that doesn't really say much. Like, 6,000 years tree doesn't really affirm that anything is 14 billion or anything else. So, what's the problem? It's the same problem. Like, eventually you're going to hit a time frame where you just don't have access to what you think you have access to. That's just one of the problems. Same problem with science, the actual proper method of science. Once you're outside of the bounds of what you can manipulate, it's all guesswork. At least Michio Kaku, total weirdo, at least he affirms that. You know? At least he affirms it. He admits it, right? Good. Good. Anywho. All right. I'm going to pick a place for you guys to go, and you guys aren't going to know. And I got to get back to drawing. I got to eat something. I got a lot of hand-drawn animation I'm doing. Very excited about this animation, though, I'm doing. So make sure you go follow OrthoThugs. I'll stream it the first part of the day. Maybe not too long if I'm not done with this thing. There's no trees 6,000 years old. Yeah, I mean, I'll grant it to them. I don't care. Who counted? I mean, they say rings, right? They're going to count a ring, right? That's going to go by the rings. Okay, here comes Reclaimer. Okay, Jim Bob, had a good question. So the answer is we measure the age of cratons, Earth's oldest rock. That's what's in question. Compared to the age of meteorites. Oh my gosh, are you serious? Are you trolling us? Are you actually trolling us? Look, you don't seem to see the problem here. How do you know the age of anything out there? Right? When you say, oh, I'm going to take an age of cratons, Earth's oldest rock. How do you know how old that is? That's a problem. Like, when you say the age of the Earth is made up of different things, right? How do you know the age of those different things? You compare it to the age of these other things called meteorites. How do you know the age of a meteorite, bro? It's just amazing, the fantasy world these people. It's like they grow. It's like their entire philosophy is Dr. Seuss, and they make fun of us. How would an Evo proponent show humans and chimps share common ancestor? Could chimps have branched into humans? No, they don't even. They just do it by similarity and genotype, honestly. But you can catch them on this and say, oh, well, obviously something that's anatomically similar can be dissimilar genetically, right? And they go, oh, yeah, of course. And then you go, well, according to you, something that's genetically dissimilar, if you go back far enough in time, you have to hold that something genetically and phenotypically dissimilar is the ancestor. So, Brooklyn, I think the answer is you can't. You can't. You just have to assume it. That's all. They just assume it. God, yeah, that's another thing, Woodworking Gunny. You could just, God could create the world with the apparent age, ancient age, older than the world. It's like, it's not like the naturalist is in a better position. They think matter's eternal. They're like, look, the age of this thing. And you're like, is matter eternal? They're like, yeah. Can matter be created? No. So you have an age for all this stuff? Just say it's eternal, all of you. All of you materialists, just say everything's eternal, honestly. At least that would be consistent. At least you'd create your own material God. The eternality, the uncreated matter existence. You know what I'm saying? Just bite the bullet. Seriously. They never ask these questions, though. It's like, I don't know how the kids are not asking their teachers this. Like, the teacher's like, and then the Earth is 14 billion years old. And can't there be one 7th grader who's just like, wait, Miss Anderson, didn't you just say the Earth is the culmination of a bunch of pre-existing matter? Yeah. So what? How do you know which piece of matter you're dating, and at what point do you say the beginning of the Earth is the beginning of the Earth? You guys can't even tell me when a life starts. They can't even tell you that a life begins at conception. That's something we can observe directly. And they're telling us the age of the Earth? When is that? Is that a small ball? Is it a big ball? Is it a fireball? Is it a water ball? When do you decide that? When it has agency. They use the same standard. When it has agency. I love laughing at the rings argument because I make a living working in the tree industry, and we are all just stardust magically kept together for some reason. Yeah. Anyway, it's all so dumb. They don't know what they're talking about. That's the reality. They don't know. They're so afraid of saying they don't know, too. Our education system is geared toward memorization of discrete facts, not reasoning. Yeah, clearly. Clearly, when you get these science communicators, Forrest Valkai is really the epitome of that, isn't he? Well, see, Jim Bob, I'm going to describe what genes are when you ask me, how does random mutation produce a vestibular system? You see, Jim Bob. You see? No, I don't see, actually. I don't see, smug prick. I'm hungry. Trees can also grow multiple rings per year. Interesting. I'm starting to find something consistent is every time you look kind of multiple layers deeper, you realize that everything that even you're drawn to believing at first, you're like, oh yeah, well, I mean, at some point I'll submit to it. Something, right? Something reasonable. You look through it and you're like, oh, that's also not always true. That's weird. It's not actually true, isn't it? Huh. So it's not. All right, what do you guys got? You got Rob, you got Nikolai, you got Fugazi, you got Andrew, you got Standing for Truth, you got not Cleve. Do you forgive your mama? Do you forgive your mama? This is basic high school knowledge. I'm not going to explain it. Yeah. This is basic. I mean, this is such a low tier 7th grade question. Okay, cool. Pretend I'm a 7th grader then. Go ahead. Pretend I'm a 7th grader. That's ironic because I don't know, a friend of scientists, if you're so afraid of I don't know, that's why you have to put a God. No, it's actually the opposite. You're still not getting this. To say that anything is possibly to be known is to assume a whole philosophy that needs to justify that. That's why we get to the tag argument. From a naturalistic view, the irony is that nothing can be known. Even from the scientific perspective, you don't actually know things for certain. It's just likelihood. It's inductive. So to say it's possible to not know something or to know something is to say that something's metaphysically possible, hypothetically possible, probabilistic, or absolutely. But the problem is the atheist doesn't have that. They don't have a standard to say anything could be ultimately known. So it's not ironic. It's totally consistent for a Christian to say there are things I can't know. But if it's true that there are things you can't know, that means there's something you can know. And if it's true that there's something you can know, then you need a justification for knowledge. It's not that hard, bro. They're like, yeah, no, I just grant myself knowledge and truth and lots of logic and reasoning and mind and the regularity of nature and everything else, Jim Bob. I don't understand. Ironic. No, it's not ironic. We're consistent. Can I pick a deistic God? Does it have to be your God? Well, no, it's not about picking, Reclaimer. It's about if God exists, there's not a multiplicity of gods. If you don't actually believe God exists, then you're still stuck in your foundational arrangement that you call your epistemology. You're stuck in empiricism. You're stuck in naturalism, right? Hey, you can live your whole life stuck in that paradigm if you want. But you're not picking a God. You're apophatically removing all the other claims and you're doing a filtering process. That's what it is. The Roman gods knew how to party. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, there's all these other gods that you're talking about. Some people say this, they go, oh, but the Christians just atheist with these other gods. And if you talk to someone like me, I'm like, not so fast, bucko. From my view, it's totally permissible that what you call an alternate god is actually a demon. That they actually do exist. They're just not God. You know, like Muslims. Have you guys decided where you want to go? Let's leave it to democracy. Let's prove that democracy fails. Where do you want to go? You got Standing for Truth. You got Rob. You got Nikolai. You got Fugazi. You got Crucible. That's good enough. Rob, Nikolai, Fugazi, Crucible. There was 4. And then there were 4. Rob, Standing for Truth. The debate is the Trinity over there. That could be interesting. Little dense. Patristic faith. I don't see him on the list here. Bend to antiquity. You guys are all mixed, see? Democracy. We're already fractioned here. Individualism for the fail. F. I wish you could divide us up. That would be kind of cool if they could make that happen, where it's like a random split. You could choose 3 or 4, automatically divides you guys. Who's working on that? FDA's good. Rob is debating. No prep debate. What's the topic? I'm trying to get standing for truth. That's Donnie, right? Let's go to Donnie. Tell him in the chat that I'm trying to get him on to talk about evolution, okay? Do me a favor. Tell him I'm trying to get him up here to talk about evolution. Aubrey Marcus or T-Dump? No, I'm not. We're never looking at T-Dump again. Ever again. So, all right, y'all. Thanks. Shout out to Jake for having me on. And fun little co-stream. I will get back to drawing and animating. And I'll probably stream tomorrow. But if I don't, go follow OrthoThugs, please. And hit the like and the notification bell. And yeah. Let's do this.